Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. My name is David Donaldson with the National Center for Grow Your Own. I'm blessed and honored to have Josh Laney and Todd Birch, who happen to both be excellent state apprenticeship agency directors of the states of Alabama and Connecticut. But our organization is co-hosting today's webinar with the National Association of State and Territorial Apprenticeship Directors. And we're here today to talk about the implications of the USDOL's proposed changes to apprenticeship regulation. A little bit about National Center for Grow Your Own, in case you're not aware of us. We're a 501c3 nonprofit that spun out of Tennessee Department of Education, where in my previous role, I served as the Chief of Human Capital, and we created the first statewide Grow Your Own program that led to the first registered apprenticeship for teaching. And so this work's very passionate and close to our hearts as we continue to strive to remove financial barriers for aspiring educators. We've now added senior leadership from the West Virginia Department of Ed to our team, who created the second program in the nation. And we work with states, districts, and ed prep providers and labor agencies to launch or expand registered apprenticeships or grow your own programs for aspiring teachers and now principals as well, based on our work last summer with North Dakota. We also had the honor of co-chairing with Teens for Impact and AACTE to draft the national guideline standards for the K-12 teacher registered apprenticeship as part of the Pathways Alliance. Thing that I'm continue to be very excited about is the momentum of registered apprenticeships and teaching. And I think that's why we want to have this conversation today, to understand how these proposed regulations could potentially benefit or potentially detract from that momentum. But as you can see, everybody's looking for solutions to teacher shortages, and registered apprenticeships have been around 87 years, and it's another tool in the toolkit for folks to be able to leverage. I'm going to take some words out of my dear friend Todd Birch's mouth, but it's never made sense to pay tuition to a university to provide free labor to a school district, and we call that student teaching. We got to stop doing that. There's too many awesome individuals who would make excellent teachers if the financial barriers were not in place. And so what's exciting about this too is, as you can see on the screen, these are not just education publications, but also the Washington Post, PBS NewsHour, NPR, but shout out to K-12 Dive and Education Week and others that have done an excellent job focusing on solutions. I'm tired of talking about teacher shortages. I'm excited to see, because of states like Alabama, because of states like Connecticut, and so many across the country that are taking advantage of registered apprenticeships as a potential solution to address this shortage. And so just this week, we're excited. We just put out an email blast this morning. We're now at 37 states in our National Registered Apprenticeship and Teaching Network. We recently added Nevada, Maryland, and Georgia. So 74% of the country is getting together to learn from one another. That's the one thing I always say. I've made more mistakes than anybody in this, because I've been doing this for now 5 years, which is crazy to think about when we started this back in Tennessee. And so we want to learn from everybody. Everybody wants to learn from one another, and please avoid the mistakes that I've made. And so we have our state network, we have our district network, and we have our ed prep network. And we're blessed to have Alabama and Connecticut both be respective members of our state network. And they've been, Josh and Todd are people that I know I personally have learned a lot from. And so if you're interested in learning more about our networks, please contact us to join. They're absolutely free. If you could use some support after a call like this about how to design your registered apprenticeship in any way. But what I'm excited about is to have the leadership and use this platform with National Association of State and Territorial Apprenticeship Directors to better understand and what are the questions we should be asking about these proposed regulations, because the momentum is there for this work to continue, and we want to make sure that we reach this idea, and it's possible to one day to ensure every child has not only the teacher they need and deserve. And so with that, I do just want to reference a disclaimer as we have this conversation. And please, folks, I encourage you to read this. For those who like to watch professional sports, it might come across as, you need the express written consent of Major League Baseball to televise, any aspects of the game. But I think we are recording this session. I know we have some journalists attending today's session as well. we just want to get the word out. We're excited for folks to ask questions. The most important thing is that second paragraph, I would say. Everyone attending, everyone who watches this on YouTube later, you are encouraged to review the entire proposed regulations and make your own assessments of the impact of the proposed rules on your business and the national apprenticeship system. This today is just a conversation to say, here's what they are. Here's how this could impact specifically teaching or principalships, but the K-12 aspect of it, the education aspect. And I'm very blessed to have Josh and Todd with us today. Just two men that I've learned a lot from in the last couple of years. And so with that, I believe I'm turning it over to Todd Birch. Todd, thank you so much for being here.
Good morning. Thank you, David. Thank you for having me, and to everybody participating. Thank you very much. My name is Todd Birch. Not only a state apprenticeship director for the state of Connecticut, but I have the distinct honor of being the president of the National Association of State and Territorial Apprenticeship Directors, serving these 33 states and territories, well over half of the registered apprenticeships throughout the United States and its territories, and a great partner with National Center for Grow Your Own. So that being said, there's a map right here of what we call the federal states, which is an oxymoron, but these are states that are actually operated by the National Office of Apprenticeship. The light blue ones are the dark blue ones, I'm sorry, are the recognized state apprenticeship agencies. If you think in a context, it's kind of like McDonald's, so to speak. McDonald's is a corporation with franchises. We as state apprenticeship agencies are federally authorized to operate on behalf of the National Apprenticeship Act. Next slide, please. So there's this NPRM that's been out there for a little bit of a while, and a lot of folks are like, wow, what's this interesting document? Some people that are voracious readers have read Ulysses one time in their life. It's kind of like doing that yet again. Nearly 800-page document. Apprenticeship has long been touted as one of the best workforce development programs ever. We concur, but we are the ones that not only bake the bread, we can slice the bread as well. So therefore, it is the best thing since sliced bread. That being said, this NPRM was released. There are a lot of ideas that the Department of Labor, National Department of Labor, has issued in this. It is their intent, my belief, specifically as the president of NASTAT, is my belief that they're trying to augment a system to make it better, but also to align with other workforce development programs. It's not to say that the programs that we currently administer and oversee on behalf of employers. So let me be very, very clear. Apprenticeship is not a train and pray type of initiative at all. It is a job from day one. A company hires their apprentices, registers them as apprentices, which is nothing more than an agreement between an employer and employee that the employer says, I'm going to train you to do the tasks of your profession. And the employee as an apprentice agrees to say, okay, that's great, over a course of time. So that being said, this isn't a pool of candidates to become employees later. This is a job. This is a job to get better at your skills. Again, been around, as David had said, for nearly 90 years, some say for many centuries. So the rulemaking process right now, as we have this slide, the agency has drafted it, the proposed rule. We are right now in what is circled in number 5. As number 4, the agency has published its notice. The public reviews this docket and submits comments to the agency. That being said, we're in a commentary phase, and I say we. This is everybody that might be affected or has concerns about how they either operate or the intent of the agency to change regulations for registered apprenticeship in general. There's been quite a bit of controversy and discussion on this amongst my peers, amongst employers that are registered apprenticeship sponsors, as we call them. As we have gone forth, myself, many other states, Alabama included, developing student teacher and teacher registered apprenticeship programs. We first of all thank you for your partnership. Secondly, if you're on this call and have thought about this concept, please reach out to David and his crew. They do fantastic work in cooperation with the state apprenticeship agency directors. So right now we're in this public review part. We were asked today to have some conversation of what may or may not affect you currently or going forward. So with that being said, we're in that phase of commentary. Most states are going to be sending in their own commentaries. As president of NASDAD and representing 33 states and territories, we are coming up with a majority position. Not all of our states have answered some of our surveys, so we can't say it's unanimous position, but we're currently working on a majority position of all of our states. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. With that being said, I think that was the beginning of the end of my part, the beginning of the presentation. Sorry, David.
All right, Todd.
This my cue. Sorry about that.
No worries. This is great, Todd. So thank you for that overview of where we are so far. And so my first question to you is just simply overarching. Why is the USDOL considering making this change?
Again, this is just my personal opinion at this point in time. I'm not a position of the state of Connecticut nor of NASDAD. I think they're trying to augment what registered apprenticeship is to make it better. There's no question about it. That's the intent. There's someone's idea, and then it has to go through fruition and become from concept to actuality. That's actually this process. And people sometimes say, well, throw something against the wall, see if it sticks. It's just, again, my opinion that all of the nearly 800 pages are something to augment what we currently have had for a long time. Congress has tried to reauthorize the National Apprenticeship Act for nearly, well, probably about a decade now. And I think this is a regulatory attempt to augment something that I think we can all agree is one of the best highlighted and implemented workforce development program called Registered Apprenticeship.
So you showed that slide earlier that showed, the process and the map. If this was to go through, when would this go into effect?
Well, that's a very good question. We're trying to get some clarification on that. There's everything in government has a process. So right now, I believe there's around 90 people that have commented. The commentary phase ends March 18th. Usually with most of these commentary phases, entities that wish to comment flood it at the last minute. The proposers of the NPRM themselves have to take a look at it. They have to answer questions, so on and so forth. Again, a whole other process I'm not entirely versed in. But there is a timeline I should say there is a timeline to be determined of when these regulations may go into effect. So I don't want to really go on record giving a definitive. It may be quick or it may be long in duration, but we're unfortunately to be determined by the feds.
Todd, I'm going to put you on the spot on this one. Do you think is it feasibly possible that it could occur before the next school year? So August, September, is that possible?
I don't think it would be likely. I can't say if things are possible or impossible. I just, my own personal take on it, the conversations I've had with others throughout the country. I would also defer to Josh Laney as well. There was also a part of this. Anything can be possible. Is it feasible?
Yeah.
I'm entirely sure.
That's right. That's right. All right. One more question for you at this point, Todd, and folks too. Feel free to submit questions in the chat as well, and we'll get to them after Josh's presentation. Todd, one more for you. Sure. What happens if there is a change in administration based on the November election? Would these regulations still apply? Get it's a hypothetical, but just kind of curious for us to be thinking about.
As a hypothetical, if regulations go through and there's a new administration, is my only personal understanding that executive orders can change regulations. I think I gotta reserve myself to just that comment.
Yeah, and I need a refresher on Schoolhouse Rock myself, so that's helpful to know. And thanks for that reminder there that EOs can potentially override. So thank you, and understand what you're able to say at this time. Todd, thank you so much. And with that, I think we're going to turn it over to Josh. Josh, please feel free to take it away.
Thank you. I am going to share my screen and pick up from here. Let me do that now. All right, David or somebody, y'all give me a thumbs up. Let me know you're seeing that screen there.
We are all good. We can see it.
Yeah, so the very first thing I want to say, we're gonna talk about just a few examples of items that are being proposed for change in this NPRM that were specifically selected because they're probably most applicable to you as people who are running apprenticeship programs for education and teachers, whether it's principals or teachers or other things that I know are in the pipeline people are working on. So the questions you were just asking, David, about timeline, part of that is addressed in the proposed rule itself. The question really is, when are the proposed rules adopted? And then that determines then how long the timeline goes from there. So in the rules, if the current proposed rules were to be adopted, let's say, before next school year, for example, just to kind of go back and answer your question, what do we think about when these might go in? There is a school of thought that there is a hurry up process going on here so that these can be done before the next election. So they can be at least implemented and adopted before the next election. I don't know whether that's accurate or not. Seems to make sense based on the way these things are being rolled out. Todd mentioned that they've attempted to update these rules through the legislative process several times and had no luck at that. So instead, we're going with this pretty significant. Personally, I don't call this a rules update. I call this a rules change because this is not just tweaking existing rules. This is a whole new set and a lot of different things. So let's assume that just for the sake of a hypothetical, that these rules are adopted and they go into effect, I don't know, October, November. Inside the proposed rules, there is a timeline that's laid out. The first thing that's spelled out on that timeline is talking about when the state apprenticeship agencies, so that would be us, like me and Todd and those others that you saw on that map, when we would have to become compliant with the proposed new rules. That is December 31st of 2026, the way it's written in the rules right now. That is significantly problematic for us and those of you who are in one of those dark blue states on that map, because that means most of the states, just like mine right now, we're all in the middle of our legislative processes, our legislative sessions. So some of the changes that are proposed in the federal rules would require changing some state laws so that the state laws didn't conflict with the federal. If you've ever dealt with the state legislative process, wherever you're from, you know that banking everything on being able to change state law in one legislative session, when you've got a lot of interested voices in that mix, I wouldn't place a lunch money bet on that one. So that is one of the concerns here, is that this timeline for state apprenticeship agencies like mine and Todd's and the other 30 around the country to become compliant with these proposed rules is just way too short. And so there's been some proposals out there. Hey, let's say that whenever they come into effect, it goes, you've got 2 years after that or something along those lines, instead of a very specifically set date, December 31 of 2026. More importantly, more directly impactful for those people on the phone who are running apprenticeship programs already. If you're in a state apprenticeship agency or if you're in an OA agency, previously recognized programs would have 2 years after that state apprenticeship agency became compliant. So you really would have then, according to the proposed timeline, through December of 2028. Sounds like a long time, but just like David just mentioned a while ago, he's been working on teacher apprenticeship for 4 or 5 years now, and it feels like 5 minutes because the stuff goes so quickly and the pace moves so fast. Another special consideration when you're talking about teacher apprenticeships, I was a K-12 principal and career tech administrator and all of that. So I understand the time frame that education typically works in. We work in terms of academic years, right? And you really only get to make significant changes and updates to your program, to your apprenticeship or whatever it is, to start effective the next academic year. So we can't just turn on a dime in redesigning and reconfiguring programs to be compliant with new rules. So in the nascent stages where many of these teacher apprenticeships are right now, it would be a significant burden and a significant time investment to kind of turn that battleship and be able to recalibrate to be in compliance with the new rules. So let's talk about just a few examples of what the new rules are. The number one with a bullet that I think that most teacher apprenticeship programs will be concerned about is a proposed change or elimination of the competency model. So just a real quick refresher, there are currently 3 models of apprenticeship, and these models apply to how we calculate the on-the-job learning that is done as part of the apprenticeship. The most traditional is time-based. That's what's been done forever and ever. That's what's done commonly in the building trades, which is the majority of apprenticeships, historically have been in building trades. And for example, if you want to be an electrician, you do a time-based program, typically around 8,000 hours of on-the-job learning, which equates to roughly 4 years of on-the-job learning. And so that's the time-based model. Then there's also a newer model and more widely adopted in other industries. And this is where the growth has been going on, and that's a competency-based model. A competency-based model doesn't really specify exactly how long you have to be doing each of the different job functions. Instead, it's more specific about, in Alabama and most places, we write our competencies to say the apprentice will be able to observable action verb, right? So the apprentice teacher will be able to implement classroom management procedures in compliance with whatever. So the apprentice will be able to observable action verb. And a person moves through the on-the-job learning component of their apprenticeship by documenting competency in those areas. That means that a person can move through as quickly or as slowly as it takes. And for those of you in education, we talk about differentiated learning. Competency models are perfect for setting up differentiated learning models for the participants. So if I was, came in with a bunch of prior knowledge, I might be able to demonstrate competency in certain areas more quickly. Somebody else might take a longer period of time, but the end result is nobody's completing the apprenticeship until they've been documented competent in all of the necessary areas. There is currently a third way, and it's called a hybrid model. Again, Josh's opinion, I personally think the hybrid model is about like an El Camino. It's not a good car, it's not a good truck. You took 2 good things, pushed them together, and came out with something that was, mediocre at best. The hybrid model attempts to take those competencies, and you still document competency in the areas, but you also have to document a set amount of time doing those different things. At first blush, that sounds fine, but when we get down to the specifics, one of the things that they're proposing in the rules is a minimum of 2,000 hours of on-the-job learning for every occupation, and that those hours have to be specifically documented in addition to the competencies. All right, well, that's all fine and good, but 2,000 hours, by the way, what we have typically said, most state apprenticeship agencies say, when you're doing a competency-based model, it's not about the hours, but we still use what was previously called apprenticeability rules. And we say if it doesn't take at least a year of on-the-job learning to do, then it's probably not a high enough skilled occupation that we need to be investing the time and energy and funds to create an apprenticeship for it. So there's a difference in saying it takes a year of on-the-job learning versus taking 2,000 hours very specifically for each year. One perfect example of that is teacher apprenticeship programs. I know there are models currently in play and some that are in development, including one we're working on in Alabama, where we're looking for people that already have bachelor's degrees in certain programs or certain fields, whatever that field is. And we want to bring them in, put them into a year-long apprenticeship program to make them into a teacher. Well, a typical teacher contract is 182, 187 days, somewhere in that range. A teacher's not going to work 2,000 hours of time during a full professional year of contract. Even if they go and work summer school, 4 hours a day, 4 days a week for 4 weeks in the summer is still not going to get you to 2,000 hours. So one of the pending questions that we have not been able to get answers from the Department of Labor is, what about these single-year apprenticeship programs in jobs like teaching, where a full professional year is not 2,000 hours on the job? Does that mean that we now have to extend that program and make it longer just for the purposes of meeting this minimum requirement? No answers forthcoming from the department. They have elected not to answer questions during the comment period. Though they do have the ability to do that, they've elected not to. And so that question is up in the air. So those of you who have those kind of programs or are developing those kind of programs, we don't know. We don't know what would become of that 1-year-long apprenticeship if we move to this 2,000-hour program and move away from competency to essentially everything becomes a hybrid. It doesn't say it in the language, but in some of the webinars that they've done, they referred to this new model as a unitary approach. So there would be no more time-based or competency-based. There would be a unitary approach. And that there in red is the citation. If you want to go and look, and I'll give you a link in a minute, if you want to go and look at the full NPRM, that's the citation you can search for to find that section. Next item that would be of concern to you all, endpoint assessments. The proposed rules would add an endpoint assessment requirement for every occupation, every apprenticeship. And the idea for this comes from some European models. The German model, for example, they have the German Chamber of Commerce, both at the local and the national level. And that German chamber is essentially the quality assurance organization for their apprenticeships for their whole country. And that works for them because they have confidence in that organization almost universally at a national level, that organization represents the actual needs of industry and understands the concepts, and they have developed what they call endpoint assessments, or that might not be exactly what they call them, but they've developed essentially written final exams to go along with every apprenticeship program. But they also know that every apprenticeship program meets the quality standards and includes the content that's related to that endpoint assessment. The UK more recently than Germany implemented this, and what happened there was they had an entire cottage industry come up of third-party assessment providers. And so now you've added an external testing organization to go and validate whether this apprentice is actually ready to complete or not. That also adds cost, of course, for the employer who is sponsoring the apprentice because somebody's got to pay for that test. So the model that's being proposed here is kind of based off of those, but there's still, again, some very significant unanswered questions. The first of which is, who gets to determine what's an acceptable endpoint assessment? Is it the individual sponsor of the apprenticeship program? Is it the state apprenticeship agency or the state agency, the state office of apprenticeship? If it's a DOL state, unknown. The parallels with the European systems kind of break down here because I think we could all agree, and most of us would agree, we don't have one national entity that we have universal buy-in with that we would all trust to say, yeah, you can be the organization that writes these tests. In K-12 world, almost every state has moved away from universal graduation exams, that it's one exam every single person has to pass at the end of their high school experience in order to graduate. We've tried that experiment and in most places abandoned it. Well, that's exactly what we're proposing to put into place here under this NPRM. And I think you all know as well as anybody the struggles that incurs. You see inequitable pass rates. You see places where people from disadvantaged populations are not able to pass at the same rate. All kinds of inequities associated with that, not to mention just the big overarching question of who gets to decide what's on the test and who gets to decide what test is good enough. And then the second question I've got there is for licensed occupations like teacher, are we saying that we would add an additional thing? So some states have already exams and whether it's praxis or something that's already been put into place. Would those existing exams and licensure requirements meet this endpoint assessment requirement, or are we talking about adding something else on top of? Unknown. This was one of the questions that has gone unanswered. So with that in mind, both of those considerations in mind, we're opposed to this concept of broad brush universal application of endpoint assessments. There's just too many unanswered questions and too many areas where this could conflict with specific industry needs. And that's true whether we're talking about teachers or electricians. If the state has a licensing exam that you have to pass to be an electrician, is this adding another exam, or would that exam take the place, or would that exam be the licensing exam be sufficient, to be determined. This one is called suitability determinations. And so what this basically says is that currently state apprenticeship agencies like mine and Todd's and the 30 others, we have the authority as a state apprenticeship agency to recognize occupations for state purposes that may not be previously recognized at the federal level, or they may be unique to our state in some way. This is one of the areas where SAAs like ours have really led the growth of innovation in new areas and new occupations outside of those that are traditionally done through apprenticeship. And the proposed rules would eliminate that. The proposed rules would say that only the federal administrator, which is currently that's John Ladd, only the federal administrator has the authority to make a determination for suitability of apprenticeship. So what this means is right now we've got teachers and principals, right? Okay, in the education world. What if we come along next and the state of Alabama wants to do guidance counselors or something else that is unique, it's fresh, there's not currently an outline approved for that. What we can do currently is we can recognize that at the state level, get it stood up, get it functional, and then if we choose to, we can apply for federal recognition so that it's portable across all states. Several states have done that. Several occupations have been created in that way. It's one of the best avenues to innovation and expansion into new areas. The proposed rule would eliminate that possibility. It also then would eliminate not only the process by which each state does that, but it gives a very specific process for how that would be done at the national level. The entire apprenticeship basically would have to be built out in advance, including here's the on-the-job learning, here's the related instruction, here are the interim credentials, here's where you're going to get the training, here's who's going to do the training. All of that work has to be done in advance in the proposed rules, submitted then to the department. The department can review that. They would put it out for a 30-day public comment. Then they have a 90-day period on the other end of that where they can make a determination. You could quickly run this whole process into, even if everything stayed right on time, that determination process could easily run to 6 months, 9 months. You've lost an entire school year where currently states have the ability to go in there and be more innovative and kind of run some risks. I mean, let's gamble on this. Let's go take a shot at something that's new without, a very intensive, long federal process. We are opposed to that concept of only the Office of Apprenticeship Administrator having the authority to recognize that. And then this one is something that I know because you're K-12 folks, you're going to be thinking about, you're seeing CTE apprenticeship language probably popping up. While this is not a model that would be used in most teacher apprenticeship programs, it is something that directly is K-12 relevant, so I wanted to bring it to your attention. The proposed rule would create this entirely new kind of apprenticeship called a CTE apprenticeship. This is not the same as a traditional youth apprenticeship, which in many places there is not a consistent definition. What we were hoping for and what we would potentially petition to have was a national codification, a national definition of youth apprenticeship. This is not that. This is an entirely separate type of apprenticeship. You can see there on the screen the characteristics. You got to be 16 to participate. It would include 900 paid hours of on-the-job learning. Okay, 540 hours of related technical instruction. All right, the instruction would come through some CTE program. The second part of that related instruction bullet, though, is pretty interesting. And to me problematic. It would also require 12 hours of post-secondary credit to be included in every CTE apprenticeship. Now, we're all, mostly educators and we've got our degrees, and that was part of the process to become qualified to do the jobs that we have. Understand that, but that's not true of every occupation in the world. There are many occupations where the degree is not necessary. And what we have been saying is post-secondary education is definitely necessary. But this is an example of where that language and that terminology post-secondary has been hijacked. Words have meanings. And when you say post-secondary, that means after high school. Apprenticeships are post-secondary education. But what they're meaning in this term is college credit. So why would we establish a program where every CTE apprenticeship had to get essentially 4 classes of college credit? So the people who say, I want to be a lineman, or I want to be an electrician, or I want to be an insurance salesperson. You don't even have to have a degree to do insurance sales. You need that technical training. We're going to make you go take 4 college classes anyway. It adds cost, it adds burden, and it adds, more importantly, a waste of time in the view of this is Josh's view. If I'm sending somebody and making them take classes that they know aren't applicable, why am I putting a person who wants to be an electrician? Why am I making them sit in a public speaking class? And what is their performance going to be? I mean, really, in that class, if that's not clearly tied to the work that they're doing, they have no interest in it, we're going to be setting up students for failure. We're going to be setting up people to take classes they're not interested in. It's just a bad idea all the way around. And then the other bullet here is about industry skills frameworks. Those CTE apprenticeships are proposed not to train for specific occupations, but to train more broadly for industry sectors. So these are not technical skill preparation programs as much as they are industry exploration programs. So for example, in healthcare maybe, or even in education, the person would not be going to learn how to be a nurse or learn how to be a teacher. They would be going to learn about the healthcare industry or about the education industry. The problem here is those industry skills frameworks don't exist. And really, this is the same issue that is in play when we talk about the endpoint assessments. Who gets to decide what goes into those industry skills frameworks? They would come down from on high at the national level, and how much flexibility is a local state agency going to be able to say, hey, if you want to be a teacher in Alabama or a teacher in Florida or Connecticut or whatever, these are some things that are unique to us, and these are certain things that we want to include in that training. It's unclear whether the states would even be able to make any modifications to that. And it's also unclear who's going to be writing those from the very beginning. So that CTE apprenticeship thing, I think, credit where it's due. I think they were trying to develop a model to get more high school students into apprenticeship. I just think it was a swing and a miss. In this, to stick with the baseball analogy earlier, it just didn't hit the mark in that. So there are several. I mean, the NPRM is 779 pages long, so there are a lot of topics that we don't have time to go through today, but those were some that I thought would be particularly relevant to you. Some of the others that are out there that you may want to go and kind of read up on and investigate. We talked about the timeline, the competency program, CTE, and the suitability. There's also prohibition of non-compete clauses. And I know some programs have not necessarily non-compete clauses, but they have work commitments. So, hey, if I'm the school system and I'm going to pay to send you to college to complete your apprenticeship program, and it takes 2 years of me paying that, I expect you to work for me for 2 years on the other end. Some school systems have those kind of arrangements in place already. It is unclear whether those would still be allowed. And we've asked for clarification and didn't get that. Some of these others are a little more technical things. The program reviews would have to occur every 5 years, and we won't go into that detail. Proof of financial capacity to sustain a program. Just think about this for a moment. If you've got an intermediary or a third-party organization that comes to you and says, hey, we want to sponsor a teacher apprenticeship program, the first thing that registration agency has to do is somehow dive into that employer's books or that organization's books and determine if they are financially suitable and sustainable to run an apprenticeship program. That's going to have a chilling effect on people coming to us to start new programs. I mean, employers just aren't in love with the idea of opening up their books to one more government agency so that we can go and decide whether through some undefined process, our crystal ball says that they are sustainable or not. And then there are a bunch of additional reporting requirements and wage rules. So what are you supposed to do about this right now? Todd has already mentioned that these rules were published previously. They have been out since January 17th. The comment period closes March 18th. Hear me, comment period closes March 18th. You can only submit comments through that. The only way they officially receive comments is through the portal. And you can scan that, or I don't know if David, we can maybe send this out later and you click that link. But if you want to submit a comment about these items or any other portion of the NPRM, you've got to go do that through that public comment portal. I strongly encourage you, take some time, do your own reading. Even if you just go back and kind of search for these keywords on certain items, do your own reading and make your own determinations, but just don't miss the opportunity to give input. I do think that the department is, I think I'm trying to attribute, best wishes here, I guess, or optimistic thoughts, but I think the department is legitimately interested in hearing our feedback, but silence is assent. So if we don't say anything, we don't give our feedback on how we think these things ought to be changed, then they're going to assume that the things are good to go as proposed, and that'll be the end of it. So with that, David, I'm done on my spiel. If you have any other questions or anything I skipped over there.
Yeah, so Josh, we actually quite a few questions, but I'm going to call an audible, and I'm going to
Yep.
bring Todd in now, and feel free to stay on, Josh. We're going to have Todd reference the pre-apprenticeship, youth apprenticeship piece, and then we'll go straight into questions based on what you just shared, Josh, what you're about to say, Todd, and then we already got questions in the chat as well. So Miles, I think you're going to show a screen while Todd shares some points. Todd, kicking it over to you.
Sure. Thank you very much. Josh, as always, great job. It was a lot in a small amount of time there for sure. That being said, there's been this conversation about pre-apprentice for a very long time, and I want to be very clear, not only from the state of Connecticut's stance, but also NASDAQ as a majority. Having silos has been so punitive in the United States, it's not even funny. There's something called pre-apprenticeship, and there's something called apprenticeship, period. If you want to be a pre-apprentice for youth, you want to be a pre-apprentice for veterans, or you want to be a youth or veteran, so be it. That being said, there's only two things. That's it. Apprenticeship, pre-apprenticeship. Pre-apprenticeship, in my opinion, and shared by others, is likened to what an AP program is for high school students. It could be the same thing for college students, all post-secondary students, in my opinion. If an AP is developed to basically eliminate some of the credits or the courses you have to take at a university or college, pre-apprenticeship is the exact same thing. You're working in a capacity or taking educational content, as Josh had stated earlier, in career technical education that's directly correlated to an occupation. What's unfortunately happened throughout the United States, and no discredit to academia whatsoever, except for the conversation that's been happening since the 70s, the dumb kids go to shop. Career technical education and STEM education, for that matter, do not have any zero occupational focus, where it used to. You used to go to wood shop, you became a carpenter. You go to metal shop, you became a metal worker. That being said, getting rid of all of those and having these unbelievable amounts of opportunity, CTE is shop. It's just a new fancier word. Having the STEM educators, having correlated principles of STEM with the career technical education, especially trigonometry for that matter, is paramount to the success for people for many different occupations. So even though the U.S. Department of Labor has just recently, in fact, yesterday, issued something on pre-apprenticeship, it clearly states in their training and employment notice that was just issued that they do not have any oversight and regulatory authority, where we as state apprenticeship agencies have it in a lot of our states, statute and regulation. So just very briefly on this slide, student pre-apprenticeship, again, meaning that they're just students in pre-apprenticeship. I personally disagree with what has been posed in the NPRM for the parameters of such. As Josh had stated, what employer would want to be beholden to those criteria? You're talking about children here, minors, 16 years of age. They want to play soccer. They want to be kids. They might want to have another part-time job as well. To say that they have to be in a mandatory 900 hour of on-the-job training for that profession is really short-sighted. There's no question about that. Again, pre-apprenticeship is what I call the AP for apprenticeship. You take your credits that you've earned, regardless if they're on the job or if they're in an academic setting, and they directly go into your new registered apprenticeship if you're hired as a full-time registered apprentice. So that being said, this slide deck will be shared. Yeah, I'd like to, because we're coming up on time, and David wanted to have some questions and answered, but it's critical to not give anybody any false hope about pre-apprenticeship, because it has to be directly correlated to an apprenticeship program. So thank you.
All right, Josh, Todd, thank you very much. Josh, I see you tried to answer some of the questions in the chat too. Appreciate it. Um, want to start with I want to start with one that I'm actually going to take, and then Josh and Todd, please jump in. This one, this just bothers me so much. This question, Josh, it's the one you're about to respond to. If you want to hold, the question is: would you recommend a state submit a new registered teacher apprenticeship proposal to DOL while these proposed regs are under review? The answer is yes. Submit now. Like, the fact that someone is even asking that question, that's upsetting because kids can't wait. And so all I'll say is this, and I watch what I say too, but the fact of the questions that Josh and Todd are raising, like, lack of information is information. And when you cause confusion, because I see a lot of my friends are in this attending today. We have state apprenticeship agency directors, CCSSO, our union friends, like NEA and AFT. Thank you for what you do. Like, there's so much. And the fact that everyone's like freaking out, I got a text yesterday from a state superintendent saying, what is this about? What does this mean? This, like, our hard work. So my answer to that one question, should we still submit? Yes. You always submit because you always put kids first. We will figure this out as we go. But to Josh and Todd's point, make sure your voice is heard. Whatever your voice may be, make sure it is heard. We heard some concerns today. Another question that I have in the chat is, I've noticed that many of the early comments on the proposed regulations are from associations requesting a 30-day extension of the comment period. Is there a statutory justification? And is it likely that the comment period would be extended, thereby extending the whole process? And thanks to our friend Mary at CSG for that question.
I would say, yeah, to your previous point, though, I said the same thing. Yes, register, because you don't have any idea. None of us have any idea when these rules might or might not go into effect. They could get public comment and they go, we don't even want to do this, and then just not do it. So don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Go ahead, register your program, get it stood up, start serving kids. If we have to come back later and make adjustments, then that's what we'll do. But to that question about the extension on the timeline, that's a political question, and anybody's guess is as good as anybody else's. Josh's guess is that no, they're not going to extend it. They can extend the comment period, and it has been extended in other cases. Every federal agency uses this process. In some cases, it's extended because there's very low public comment and nobody's answered and they need comments. In other cases, the justification has been there's a lot of public comment and we're not sure we've had time to get it all in yet. So they've extended that. But there's also, like I mentioned before, the school of thought that the Department of Labor is working, the administration is working to get this done pre-election. So that, who knows, but if I was to place bets on it, I would say there's not going to be an extension. But that's,
I would agree.
Okay. For anybody who is looking in the chat, we did put the comment link as well. We will be recording this and uploading it, but for anybody who wants the link now, it is available. Next question from another dear friend who AASA, American Administrators and Superintendent Association, has been nothing but great in promoting teacher and now principal registered apprenticeships. The question is it your understanding that programs can continue to operate while they get into compliance with new rules? And I'm going to add a caveat. Should the new rules pass?
Yeah. Yes. Somebody else asked a question about, what's the timeline for non-SAA states? And I went and opened up the NPRM. It's the same. It's 2 years. It says the existing registered apprenticeship programs previously registered by the administrator prior to the effective date of the final rule have 2 years following the effective date of the final rule. So whenever these final rules go in, it's 2 years. And yes, you've got that time. You don't have to stop operating in the interim. You continue to operate. You've got 2 years to come into compliance.
One of the things that really also irked me a little bit that was shared was that idea of proof of financial capacity to sustain a program. I am the first one who has been the biggest advocate to say you got to take the Kevin Costner approach, not Yellowstone, but Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. And I have so many examples of like even the SAFE grant. That's the irony of this. Like, Last year, Safe Grant, 35 of 45 states said they were going to do teacher apprenticeship. But we have so many examples: Florida, North Dakota, Nebraska. Todd, there's conversations in Connecticut where legislators, Delaware passed legislation to put, that once they're like, wait, this is a possibility, we'll put, or we're going to do this, and here's money that will then support it. Tennessee, we had, there's money now, there's always money in the banana stand, but you got to show possibility. Somebody has to pilot, someone has to innovate. And so that would really potentially hurt folks from getting things off the ground if that was to happen.
Two comments on that. First of all, who's the judge and jury on the person's financial capacity? And secondly, as a corporation usually pays no taxes and shows no profit, are they financially capable of sustaining an apprenticeship program? And who is to be judge and jury on that as well? So that one there has been a big sticking point on a moral, social, inquisitive, and personal level on many, many different people's minds. But that's it's like, huh? To your point, David, I hate to just summarize it, not as a word, but as an expression. Huh?
Somebody put something in the chat about our previous question about the extension, and I didn't see this. It came out yesterday from the DOL, and the short version is no, they're not going to extend it. They put out a memo yesterday to that effect. So
thank you to that.
Thank you to anonymous attendee for flagging it.
Yeah, anonymous attendee registered multiple times today. No, totally understand people's situations with their questions. I also want to flag something. This is just a quick anecdote, but this idea that only OA can approve occupations. Teacher occupation could have been in place 2 years prior to when it was launched. We submitted our application in Tennessee back in 2020. And at the time, Tennessee was an OA state. It's not the case anymore. And I want to give shout out to Mike Nelson and Bill Krause, two just great individuals at the U.S. Department of Labor that helped me and Tyra Kopis and Gene Luna figure out how to get this done. But the fact that the occupation didn't get approved till November of 21 with the first program, January of 2022, and everyone to this day tells me that's so fast. And yet kids missed out on potentially 2 years of having folks start going through this program earlier. Innovation comes from the states. And when I worked at a state, innovation comes from the districts. Clarksville, Montgomery, and Austin Peay State University had an idea. I'm so blessed to have been in their backyard to listen to them. And so I that's something that Todd, Josh, I don't know if you want to go off on a soapbox on, but that one, that's innovation comes from the states.
I could, but I digress. Just like politics, all apprenticeships are local. Therefore, my opinion shall be developed accordingly.
All right. I understood. Got that. I remember when I heard about the golf lawn apprenticeship, and there's Whole Foods as a pizza apprenticeship. Like there's some really cool stuff happening across the country that we could all benefit from learning from. And I say this with a little bit of like, in the last 2 years, my eyes have been open from all the travel we get to do. So yeah, back to your point, Todd, couldn't agree more. The endpoint assessment, Josh, thanks for bringing that up. There are incredible state licensure boards. And in the case of Tennessee, I oversaw state licensure myself. We have a lot of people advocating about, how should we properly assess individuals? And that's, to your point, already licensed positions. So any additional burdens, that is something that, folks who are very passionate about the use of tests and are they even adequate to assess the effectiveness of a future teacher? It's important for voices to be heard. And that's what we're going to continue to encourage, voices to be heard. Josh, Todd, anything you'd like to add on that one? And I'll go into I think I see a question in the chat that I'll come to in a second.
I'll go before Josh because I know just to reiterate what he had before. This is a employer's workforce development program, period. They're attesting that their employee is competent to the way and parameters they set forth in their work schedules. They're teaching their person to do their job and their occupation their way. Their endpoint assessment, they've assessed them for a certain amount of time, giving them wage increases, had the ability of putting them on probation for inadequacy, so on and so forth. endpoint assessment is what they say so, in my opinion, as opposed to a test. So, Josh, on your point earlier about the endpoint and how it was removed from a lot of states, I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. Thank you.
Yeah. So I was about the removal. I was talking about graduation exams, high school graduation exams in the early 2000s. That was all the rage, right? We all had under No Child Left Behind and like that. We all had high school graduation exams, and we saw major disparities in the pass rates of those exams. We saw people not getting high school diplomas because we had this cookie cutter approach. I would just say, as far as endpoint assessments go, the only other thing I would add is we say employers vote with their checkbook. Employers are not going to just be graduating people out of this apprenticeship program, giving them raises, moving them from apprentice status to journey worker status, all of those associated things. They're not going to just push people through and cost themselves money by having a poorly trained employee. They have no motivation to do that. And so the endpoint assessment doesn't prove to that particular employer that that person is any more qualified than all of that years of training that they've done as an apprentice. This is to prove to some unknown third party somewhere else that the apprenticeship itself is any good. Well, the employer is voting with their checkbook. They're the ones deciding whether this apprenticeship is meeting their needs or not. So that's all I'll add on that.
Yeah. All right. Recognizing time and where we're at. Just one thing I want to point out: the 2,000 hour, if that is literally every program we've launched in now 20 states has been under 2,000 hours per year because of that idea of a school year. We do it based on a 9 to 10 month contractual agreement that folks have in place. So just want to point that out. Let's see here. I want to get David's, our dear friend David from Wisconsin. Part of the NPRM is an anti-splittering of programs, although there are similar apprenticeship trainings that may differ in small portions. Are you concerned with how restrictive this can be with regard to the regional approach to apprenticeship training? Todd, Josh?
Regional approach is just like a local approach. If they're amenable to such, this will be it. Splintering would be, there's a lot of different, basically watering down of the occupation. I don't think we would be proponents to that at all. If it wants to be just a standalone occupation, so be it. Being said, thinking that's something that's currently established, and if it's regionally to say, hey, we want to do this instead, I think all of us would take a look at that to see if it's apprenticeable, so to speak, as opposed to watering down a current occupation. It becomes its own, but de minimis as opposed to the overall umbrella.
Really quick, Josh, you answered a question in the chat that said, hey, could that assessment just be employer decided assessment? And your answer was exactly correct. It's unclear. And so again, folks, please make your voice heard. The fact that it's not clear is the problem on some of these. Finally, we have an OA block grant along with incentive programmatic funding as a stick and carrot. Take our money and you'll have the financial capacity. That might be one way it's being looked at, but I'm sorry. If we're talking, I don't know what OA block grant, unless we're talking safe based funding, but that ain't accomplishing registered apprenticeships for teaching. And I'm saying that as Josh and Todd have to see all occupations. We're biased, right? We're a one-trick pony. We're focused on teachers. 300 grand, and in some cases, $1 million. When you have to split that up amongst cybersecurity, plumbing, welding, like you need a bigger carrot, a much bigger carrot if we're going to be doing this type of work. Josh, Todd, any final thoughts? Miles, as you pull up our just contact us slide one last time.
I would say that that carrot and stick question is very relevant, and the state of Alabama, we are not currently accepting any new federal grants related to apprenticeship because, as we say, the juice ain't worth the squeeze. We strongly value our ability to innovate, meet the needs of our local employers, build programs that are designed to meet employment needs of our citizens, and we are not willing to trade it for, as you mentioned, David, what's essentially, it sounds like a lot of money, but it's essentially a pittance in comparison to what it would take. We're not going to give up the flexibility. We lose more ability to serve by giving up that flexibility than we gain by taking the money. And that's our current position. So
Todd, any final thoughts?
As I've always stated, apprenticeship is not lesser than, it's equal to that. Somebody that went through higher education. Because you have they're breaking the paper ceiling through a registered apprenticeship and utilizing skill-based hiring practices by employers. Is about time we had that discussion. And just thank you for having us represent our organization of NASDAQ and being party to this wonderful crowd today. Thank you, David.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming on out. Again, we'll send this out, we'll upload it. Josh and Todd, thank you for your expertise. Again, make sure your voice is heard, whatever your voice is, make sure it is heard. Bring your lens to the table from protecting the work of teacher and principal apprenticeships. Josh and Todd, the fact that you can be this knowledgeable about how this affects teaching, and yet you're responsible for all occupations, speaks a lot to your both of your intellect and experience. So thank you. On behalf of National Center for Grow Your Own and National Association of State and Territorial Apprenticeship Directors, thank you for coming today. Take care, everyone.